When the trash became a weapon, the neighborhood looked like something out of a real estate magazine: rows of neatly trimmed lawns, identical mailboxes, and houses that all carried the same sense of controlled perfection. This was the world of the Homeowners Association, a place where order was everything, and one wrong move could draw the wrath of whoever thought themselves most powerful. In this case, that self-appointed enforcer came in the form of a woman everyone had learned to call Karen. Karen wasn't just a regular HOA member, she lived for the rules. The kind of neighbor who measured your grass with a ruler, who took pictures of your car if it wasn't parked at the perfect angle, who sent emails to the board if a garden gnome dared appear in someone's flower bed. She thrived on control, and she knew exactly how to wield it. Her latest obsession, however, wasn't about someone's grass height or mailbox paint. It was about something much simpler: a trash can. To her, it wasn't just a bin for waste, it was an opportunity to show her authority. The trouble started one Thursday morning, right after trash pickup. The homeowner, let's call him Alex, had neatly rolled his bin back up from the curb and parked it by the side of his driveway, tucked away where it wouldn't bother anyone. He thought nothing of it. But when he returned later in the day, he found it lying on its side, toppled over, garbage lid flung open as if it had been kicked. At first, Alex assumed it was just the wind. The neighborhood was known for gusts that sometimes rattled fences or knocked over lawn chairs. He stood the can back up, closed the lid, and moved on with his day. But when it happened again the following week, and again the week after, that excuse started to wear thin. Alex began to notice a pattern. Every week, right after the bins had been emptied, his trash can would mysteriously end up sprawled across his driveway or lawn. Strangely, none of the neighbors seemed to have the same problem. Their bins stayed upright, perfectly in place, while his always ended up tipped over like someone was trying to make a point. That it wasn't until one afternoon, when Alex returned home a little earlier than usual, that the truth revealed itself. Driving down the quiet street, he saw Karen walking along the sidewalk with her little dog in tow. As she passed his driveway, she glanced at the bin, then without hesitation shoved it with her hand until it fell to the ground. She didn't even look around to see if anyone had noticed. She simply kept walking, her dog trotting beside her as if nothing unusual had happened. Alex sat there in disbelief. The wind hadn't done it. The trash collectors hadn't left it that way. It was Karen, purposefully, repeatedly, and for no reason other than to make his life more difficult. At first, Alex tried to rationalize. Maybe she thought his trash can wasn't stored correctly. Maybe she was trying to enforce some rule about where bins should be placed after collection. After all, this was an HOA neighborhood, and rules often mattered more than common sense. But the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't about rules. This was about harassment. Karen had made a hobby out of targeting him, and the trash can was just her latest weapon. Alex decided to test his theory. The next week, after the garbage truck came, he carefully placed his bin far back against his garage wall, nearly invisible from the street. Yet somehow, when he checked again later that day, the bin was lying on its side, just as before. The only explanation was that Karen had walked up his driveway and knocked it down deliberately. That it wasn't just inconvenient, it was infuriating. Every week, without fail, he had to stand his trash can back up, close the lid, and clean up whatever small bits of waste had spilled out. Each time, it felt more personal. She wasn't just knocking over a bin, she was sending a message: I can do whatever I want, and you can't stop me. Alex's frustration built slowly, but steadily. The petty annoyance turned into a burning sense of injustice. Why should one person get to harass their neighbor simply because she thought she was above everyone else? Why should she have the power to make his life more difficult, week after week, without consequence? The tipping point came when Alex discovered his trash can not only knocked over but scratched along the side, as though Karen had dragged it deliberately. The plastic was scuffed, and the lid was cracked. That's when Alex realized this wasn't just about tolerating a nuisance anymore. This was about standing up for himself. He began to think carefully about what he could do. Confronting Karen directly would likely just fuel her behavior. She would deny everything, twist the story, and maybe even try to weaponize the HOA rules against him. Reporting her to the board? That might work, but only if he had proof. And proof wasn't easy to get when Karen carried out her petty acts in the quiet daylight, never thinking anyone was watching. So Alex decided he needed to be smarter. If Karen wanted to play games, he would play too, but on his terms. The idea started as a simple thought, but the more he considered it, the more appealing it became. If Karen insisted on knocking over his trash can, maybe it was time to give her one she wouldn't see coming. One that would stop her dead in her tracks, and with that, Alex began preparing his plan. Once Alex made up his mind, the irritation that had been boiling inside him started to transform into something else: determination. Karen had been playing a petty game for weeks, and she thought she was winning. But Alex wasn't going to let her keep knocking over his trash can as if it were her personal hobby. He wanted to stop her, and he wanted to do it in a way she wouldn't expect. The first step was to think carefully about what Karen wanted. She thrived on control and the satisfaction of knowing she had gotten under someone's skin. Every time Alex picked his trash can back up, she probably smirked to herself, knowing she had caused a minor inconvenience. That's what fueled her behavior. She wasn't damaging property in any big way, but the small, constant irritation gave her a sense of power. To beat her at her own game, Alex knew he couldn't simply yell at her or leave a note. Confrontation would only give her what she wanted: a reaction. Instead, he needed something clever. Something that would turn her little routine upside down and leave her embarrassed enough to stop for good. That's when Alex thought about technology. If he couldn't catch her red-handed by being there himself, maybe he could let a camera do the work for him. He began researching small, motion-activated security cameras, devices that were discreet, reliable, and capable of recording in broad daylight without drawing attention. Within a few days, a package arrived on his doorstep. Inside was a compact camera that could be mounted discreetly near his garage. It was nearly invisible to anyone walking by, but it would capture every movement in high definition. Alex carefully installed it, pointing directly toward the spot where his trash can usually sat. The lens was angled perfectly, giving him a clear view of anyone who came near it. That first week, Alex waited with anticipation. He placed his bin out as usual after trash pickup and went about his day. Sure enough, by late afternoon, when he returned to check, the can was lying on its side once again. But this time, Alex smiled instead of frowning. He rushed back inside, opened the app connected to his camera, and replayed the footage. There she was, Karen, striding down the street with her little dog. She walked past his driveway, glanced at the bin, and without hesitation shoved it to the ground. The motion was casual, almost routine, like she was swatting a fly. She didn't even slow down. Her dog tugged at the leash, and she just kept walking. Alex had exactly what he needed: proof. Clear, undeniable evidence of Karen's behavior, but instead of reporting it right away, Alex decided to take things a step further. He could have turned the footage over to the HOA or even the local authorities, but something inside him wanted more. He didn't just want to stop Karen, he wanted to give her a taste of her own medicine. Proof alone would silence her for a while, but a clever trap that could end things permanently. So Alex began working on the second part of his plan. He started by reinforcing his trash can. He drilled small holes near the bottom and secured the base with a weighted insert, making it nearly impossible to tip over without serious effort. From the outside, it looked like any ordinary bin. But when someone tried to push it, they would quickly realize it wasn't going anywhere. Next, Alex added a little surprise. Inside the lid, he attached a harmless but startling mechanism, a small air horn rigged to go off when the can was jostled or knocked too hard. It was the kind of prank device people sometimes used on doors or lockers, designed to give the unsuspecting person a sudden shock of noise. Perfect for someone who thought she could get away with petty harassment. The setup was clever, harmless, and completely legal. It didn't cause any damage, but it guaranteed one thing: the next time Karen decided to knock over his trash can, she wouldn't walk away smirking. She'd walk away humiliated. Alex carefully tested his creation. He nudged the bin gently, no sound. He gave it a firm push as Karen normally did, blat. The air horn blared loudly, echoing through the driveway. Even knowing it was coming, Alex jumped at the sound. He couldn't help but chuckle. If it startled him, he could only imagine Karen's reaction. The stage was set. Now it was only a matter of waiting. That week, when trash pickup day rolled around again, Alex placed his bin in the usual spot, perfectly aligned just as before. From a distance, it looked no different than any other trash can on the street. But Alex knew the truth. This was the trap, carefully disguised, waiting for Karen to take the bait. He didn't have to wait long. Just like clockwork, later that afternoon, Karen appeared at the end of the street, her little dog leading the way. She strolled casually, her eyes scanning the houses as if she owned them all. When she reached Alex's driveway, she noticed the bin, standing tall as always. Karen slowed her pace. Alex watched from his living room window, barely daring to breathe. She glanced around the quiet street, saw no one watching, and moved closer. Then, with that same careless flick of her hand, she shoved at the trash can, but this time, it didn't topple. Instead, the trap was sprung. The quiet suburban street had no idea it was about to witness one of the most satisfying moments in neighborhood history. For weeks, Karen had strolled up and down that sidewalk, casually knocking over Alex's trash can as if it were her right. But this time, Alex's carefully planned trap was waiting for her. Karen leaned in, her hand pushing against the side of the bin with that same smug, thoughtless confidence she always carried. But instead of the satisfying clatter of plastic against pavement, the can barely budged. Confused, she gave it a harder shove. That was when it happened. The air horn inside blasted at full volume, an ear-splitting burst that shattered the calm of the street. The sound echoed between houses, sharp and sudden, so loud that birds scattered from nearby trees. Karen jumped back in shock, stumbling as her dog yelped and darted to the side. Her face twisted in pure panic as she looked around wildly, as though the trash can itself had roared to life. For the first time, she wasn't in control. Her hand flew to her chest, and she let out a startled cry. It was over in seconds, but the damage was done. Karen's cheeks burned red, and her posture betrayed her embarrassment. She had been caught off guard by the very object she thought she controlled. Alex, watching from behind his curtain, couldn't help but grin. The sight of Karen flustered, shaken, and scrambling to regain her composure was everything he had hoped for. He didn't rush outside. He didn't confront her. He simply let the moment play out. The trap had done the work for him. Karen glanced quickly up and down the street, hoping no one had seen. But as luck would have it, a few neighbors were outside tending to their yards. One man across the street had been watering his lawn, and he stopped mid-spray, staring at Karen with raised eyebrows. A woman a few houses down had been pulling weeds and now looked up, confusion on her face. There was no hiding it. The sound had been too loud, too sudden. Everyone knew something strange had happened, and Karen was at the center of it. Trying to save face, she tugged at her dog's leash and hurried down the sidewalk, pretending nothing was wrong. But the way she avoided eye contact told the truth. Karen had been humiliated. Alex replayed the footage later, chuckling as he watched her startled reaction frame by frame. The camera had caught everything perfectly: Karen approaching, shoving the bin, then leaping back in shock as the air horn screamed. It was priceless, the kind of evidence not just of her harassment, but of her downfall. But the story didn't end there. The following week, something unexpected happened. Trash pickup day came, and Alex once again set his bin in its usual spot. He wondered if Karen would dare try again. Would she risk another embarrassment? Or had the trap already broken her streak of control? By mid-afternoon, Karen appeared, walking her usual route. This time, though, her body language was different. She slowed as she neared Alex's driveway, but instead of marching confidently toward the bin, she kept her distance. She eyed it carefully, almost suspiciously, as if the plastic container might suddenly jump to life again. Her dog tugged forward, but she pulled back, crossing to the opposite side of the street. For the first time, Karen avoided the trash can completely. Alex couldn't believe it. The same woman who had spent weeks tormenting him had been reduced to sidestepping his driveway altogether. The trap had done more than startle her, it had changed the balance of power. Karen was no longer the aggressor. Now, she was the one on edge, watching her step, avoiding a simple plastic bin as if it were a threat. But word of the incident began to spread. Neighbors who had witnessed the loud blast started talking. Some laughed quietly to themselves, others shared the story over fences and driveways. The neighborhood grapevine was alive with whispers. Did you hear what happened to Karen? Did you see her jump when that trash can screamed at her? The tale grew with each retelling. Soon, Karen wasn't just the woman who knocked over trash cans, she was the woman who had been outsmarted by one. Her reputation, once built on intimidation, was beginning to crack. And Alex? He stayed silent. He didn't brag, didn't spread the footage, didn't claim victory. He simply let the neighborhood draw its own conclusions. The best revenge, after all, was letting Karen stew in her own embarrassment. Still, deep down, Alex knew Karen wasn't the type to give up so easily. She had been humiliated, yes, but people like her rarely back down without trying to shift the blame. If Karen couldn't push over the trash can anymore, she would look for another angle, another way to reassert her control. The trap had silenced her for the moment, but it was only the beginning of a bigger battle. The neighborhood was still buzzing quietly about the incident with the trash can. People who had seen or heard the air horn blast couldn't help but chuckle every time they passed Karen on her walks. She carried herself differently now, shoulders stiff, face pinched, eyes darting away from curious stares. She no longer looked like the enforcer of the block. She looked like someone desperately trying to erase a memory, but Karen was not the kind of person to accept defeat gracefully. Humiliation, in her mind, was something to be avenged. And if she couldn't knock over Alex's trash can anymore, she would find another way to make his life miserable. That's when she turned to her most reliable weapon, the homeowners association. The HOA had rules for everything: where you could park, what color your shutters could be, how often your lawn had to be trimmed. And Karen, being the self-proclaimed guardian of those rules, knew them inside and out. To her, the HOA wasn't just an organization, it was a tool she could use to bend others to her will. Within days of her trash can debacle, Karen filed a formal complaint. She claimed Alex's bin was improperly stored, visible from the street when it should have been tucked away behind a fence or garage. She argued that his trash can had become an eyesore for the neighborhood, and she insisted the board take action. Alex received the notice in his mailbox, neatly typed on HOA letterhead. It demanded that he relocate his trash can to a less visible area or face fines. Reading it, he could practically hear Karen's voice behind every word. It wasn't about rules at all, it was about her bruised ego. For a moment, Alex felt the familiar frustration rise in his chest. Here she was again, finding new ways to stir conflict, refusing to let things go. But then, as he read the letter again, his frustration turned to something else. Amusement, because what Karen didn't know was that Alex had done his homework. When he first suspected Karen was targeting him weeks ago, he had gone online to review the HOA's regulations, hoping to understand what ammunition she might try to use against him. And what he found was simple: the rules required that trash cans not be left at the curb beyond collection day. They said nothing about bins being stored by the side of a house or beside a garage, as long as they weren't blocking sidewalks or driveways. Alex's placement had been perfectly legal the entire time. Karen's complaint wasn't based on rules, it was based on her personal vendetta. Still, Alex knew how these things worked. The HOA board often acted more out of convenience than fairness. If someone complained loudly enough, the board tended to pressure the accused homeowner just to quiet the conflict. If Alex wanted to win this round, he couldn't just rely on being technically correct. He needed to be prepared. So he gathered his evidence. He printed out photos of his bin, neatly positioned beside his garage, completely within the guidelines. He highlighted the sections of the HOA bylaws that proved his compliance. And most importantly, he saved the video footage from his camera, the clip of Karen knocking over his trash can, followed by her startled reaction to the air horn. When the HOA board called a meeting to discuss the complaint, Alex was ready. Karen showed up, arms crossed, lips pursed in that familiar scowl. She wasted no time launching into her accusations, painting Alex as a negligent neighbor who left his trash can out for the whole world to see. She talked about neighborhood standards and property values, her voice dripping with authority as if she were the only one protecting the community. But when it was Alex's turn to respond, he stayed calm. He explained that he respected the HOA's rules and had always complied with them. He showed the photos, the bylaws, and finally, the video. The room fell quiet as the clip played, showing Karen approaching his driveway, shoving the bin, then jumping back in shock when the horn sounded. The silence afterward was heavy. A few board members exchanged glances, trying not to smirk. One of them cleared his throat and reminded Karen that the HOA's role was to enforce the rules fairly, not to settle personal grudges. Karen's face flushed crimson. She sputtered excuses, claiming the footage was taken out of context, or that she was simply helping to adjust the bin. But the evidence was undeniable. Her credibility, the very thing she relied on to control others, was crumbling right in front of her. The board dismissed her complaint. No fines, no warnings, no penalties for Alex. Instead, the chair politely but firmly suggested that neighbors should respect each other's property moving forward. The message was clear, the issue was closed, and Karen had overplayed her hand. For Alex, it was a victory sweeter than the air horn prank. Not only had he proven his innocence, but he had also exposed Karen's behavior in front of the very authority she had always used as a shield. But Alex also knew something else: people like Karen didn't quit. They regrouped. They schemed. They looked for the next angle. And deep down, he could sense this battle was far from over. Karen walked out of that HOA meeting with her head held high, but her pride was in tatters. The sting of being dismissed in front of the very board she once manipulated cut deep. Worse, she knew word would spread. In a neighborhood where gossip traveled faster than the mail, her loss would become the latest talking point, and sure enough, within days, whispers began circulating. Neighbors who had once tiptoed around Karen now spoke with an edge of amusement in their voices. They had seen the footage, or at least heard the story of it, Karen shoving over a trash can, only to be startled by her own pettiness. Suddenly, her reputation as the self-appointed rule enforcer seemed less intimidating. Instead of fear, people began responding with smirks and raised eyebrows when she passed. Karen could feel the shift. It burned her from the inside. She was no longer the silent power of the block, she was a punchline. And for someone who thrived on control, that was unacceptable. So, she did what people like her often do: she escalated that if she couldn't tear Alex down through the HOA, she would try to rally the neighborhood against him. She began knocking on doors, spinning her version of events. To some, she claimed Alex had installed dangerous devices in his trash can, making it unsafe for children. To others, she argued that Alex was undermining the community spirit by mocking HOA rules. She painted herself as the victim of a neighbor who was reckless, confrontational, and disrespectful. But Karen underestimated one thing: people had seen enough of her antics over the years. For too long, she had been the one leaving notes on doors about weeds, filing complaints over garden decorations, and lecturing neighbors about the color of their curtains. Everyone had a Karen story, and many were still quietly resentful of her constant policing. Now, with her trash can fiasco fresh in people's minds, her campaign against Alex fell flat. In fact, it began to backfire. One neighbor, a father of two, openly laughed when Karen warned him about Alex's dangerous trash can. He told her that maybe if she stopped messing with other people's property, she wouldn't have to worry about surprises. Another neighbor, usually quiet and reserved, muttered loud enough for others to hear, "Sounds like you finally got what you deserved." Even the HOA board, once her tool, began keeping their distance. They didn't want to be dragged into her personal battles anymore. It was clear she had lost credibility, and no one was eager to waste time on her complaints. Meanwhile, Alex remained calm through it all. He didn't knock on doors, didn't argue, didn't fan the flames. He let Karen dig her own hole while quietly maintaining his home, keeping his trash can exactly where the rules allowed. His silence spoke volumes, making Karen's rants look even more unhinged by comparison. As weeks passed, a subtle but powerful shift took place in the neighborhood. Where once people had rolled their eyes at Karen but tolerated her, they now began standing a little taller, feeling less intimidated. They started leaving small decorations in their yards again, parking slightly outside the perfect angles, and no longer rushing to comply with every little nitpick Karen raised. It was as if her fall from grace had given everyone permission to breathe. Karen noticed this too, and it only deepened her resentment. The more people ignored her, the more desperate she became to reassert her authority. She began walking her dog longer routes, scowling at houses, snapping pictures of minor infractions no one else cared about. But the more she pushed, the less anyone listened. For Alex, this was more satisfying than any prank. He hadn't just protected his trash can, he had shifted the balance of the entire neighborhood. Karen's reign of intimidation was crumbling, piece by piece. But deep down, he remained cautious. He knew Karen's pride was wounded, and wounded pride could be dangerous. People like her rarely accepted defeat. They obsessed, they plotted, they lashed out. And while her influence was fading, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that she had one more move left in her. Something told him the battle wasn't over just yet. The neighborhood had changed. What once felt like Karen's kingdom was now a place where people smiled freely, decorated their homes without fear, and quietly enjoyed the freedom of not living under constant surveillance. Karen, however, was simmering. She walked her dog briskly each morning and evening, eyes narrowed, clutching her phone as if waiting for a new excuse to file a complaint. But no one was listening anymore. Still, Alex knew better than to relax completely. Karen wasn't finished. She couldn't be. People like her lived off confrontation, and without it, they withered. It was only a matter of time before she tried something desperate. That moment came one sunny afternoon. Alex was inside when a loud commotion broke out on the street. Curious, he stepped outside and saw a small group of neighbors gathered near his driveway. At the center of it all stood Karen, her face red, her voice shrill. She was pointing directly at his trash can. "This is what I've been talking about," she shouted, waving her arms. "It's dangerous. It's a violation. The HOA board is ignoring it, but someone needs to do something before a child gets hurt." Her voice carried across the street, loud enough for anyone indoors to hear. She had chosen her moment carefully, waiting until plenty of people were home to stage her public outburst. In her mind, this was her chance to reclaim authority, to rally the neighborhood against Alex in one dramatic scene. But what Karen didn't realize was that Alex had anticipated something like this. For weeks, he had kept his security camera running, not just on his driveway but angled slightly wider to capture the street. Every rant, every moment of her pacing and glaring, was stored neatly on his hard drive. And today, it would finally come to use. As Karen raged, Alex walked calmly to his garage, pressed a button, and wheeled out a small portable speaker. Without a word, he connected it to his phone, opened his camera app, and cast the video feed onto the speaker's screen. The footage played clearly for everyone gathered. First, it showed Karen casually strolling past his driveway, knocking over his trash can as though it were her weekly ritual. Then came the infamous moment, the horn blasting, Karen stumbling back in shock, flailing as her dog barked wildly. The neighbors didn't even try to hide their laughter. Some clapped hands over their mouths, others chuckled openly. Karen froze, her entire performance unraveled in seconds. The very people she had tried to rally against Alex were now watching her humiliation on repeat. Her credibility, already fragile, shattered completely. "You think this is funny?" she screeched, but her voice trembled now. "This is harassment. He's harassing me." But no one was buying it. The evidence was too clear. Alex had never gone after her, she had gone after him, and the trap had simply exposed her behavior for what it was. The neighbors, once passive, were now united in their disbelief at her audacity. One by one, they began to disperse, shaking their heads, muttering under their breath. Karen's final attempt to regain control had ended in disaster. From that day forward, everything changed. She stopped filing complaints. She stopped knocking on doors. She stopped walking near Alex's house altogether, choosing longer routes for her dog just to avoid the sight of the trash can that had undone her. The HOA, weary of her constant disruptions, quietly began ignoring her messages. She had gone from feared enforcer to neighborhood outcast. And Alex? He never gloated, never taunted, never rubbed it in. He simply lived his life, trash can standing tall each week, untouched and unmoved. His silence spoke louder than any words could. He had beaten Karen not by shouting, but by outsmarting her. The petty war that had started with a knocked-over bin ended with Karen's downfall. And in its place, the neighborhood found something far better: peace.